Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Richard Bleiler, and the title of the presentation today is Alternative Facts. I'm the Humanities and Collections Librarian here at the University of Connecticut. I'm also a member of the EBSCO's Literature Council. Before I get started, I'd like to issue some of what I believe are called standard disclaimers in this presentation. And the first is my gratitude to EBSCO for offering me this opportunity. The University of Connecticut right now is having a fair amount of construction, and so if you hear bangs and noises from around the library or from the background here, that is probably construction. If you hear bangs and curses from around here, it's probably because something was cut that shouldn't have been. It's that kind of construction, it seems. So I'd like to continue. EBSCO has generously assisted and offered me advice in preparing this presentation, but I want to emphasize I made no attempts to control or direct the content, and that all of the opinions that you hear today are my own, and that if you have any objections to what I say, it should not be held against EBSCO. The next thing, although the title of this presentation uses a phrase that is much in the news, I have eschewed current political events, and we are concentrating on historical information. I want to share a bias at the very beginning, which is, I think, understandable from where it's coming from, that I believe strongly in libraries and librarianship. Another bias is that my interests lie in popular culture, and so as a result, my examples are derived from this. So to move further forward, I'd like to share with you just at the beginning the outline. I have two older examples of alternative facts, though one of the examples has three parts to it, and I want to emphasize that bad data can endure, and want to continue with then how librarians can promote information literacy to combat fake news and alternative facts, and then we'll offer conclusions and answer questions and perhaps restate data. So the first point I want to make is that free resources can be costly. We're all familiar with Wikipedia, and I'm using Wikipedia not because I have anything against Wikipedia, but simply because it is so ubiquitous it can stand on its own as an example, but it can also exemplify quite a few other resources out there. So Wikipedia is ubiquitous. It has become generally accepted as a starting point for research. It fills the position that us old-timers know as ready reference. You turn to Wikipedia for a quick answer or a quick datum when you're looking for facts. Wikipedia's policies are clearly stated and appear coherent, but the moment you start to think about them, you can tell that they are, in fact, problematic. And on the right side of your screen, you'll notice from Wikipedia, as of last week, a statement of the links to its policies, and that they explain no original research, neutral point of view, and so forth. And I'd like to ask a couple of rhetorical questions, which is how do you promote and present information on such things as atrocities and crimes and disasters while remaining neutral? And I want to show you the results of what can happen when original research is attempted to be shared via Wikipedia. So to close this little slide with a statement from my friend Jess Nevins, disagreeing with Wikipedia is akin to shooting a very large fish stuck in a pail. There's so very much to hit with your criticisms and very little space in which to miss. Wikipedia, when it comes to errors to correct and declarations to quibble with, is a target-rich environment. So without further ado, some targets. A few years ago, I was writing an entry on Sax Rohmer, and I don't know if he's as well known today as he used to be. I don't believe so. But as it says on the slide on the left, he created the series character, the criminal mastermind Fu Manchu, who was bent on Asian overthrow of the world. He's opposed by the English Secret Service agent Nayland Smith, and he wrote a whole series of these novels. They were made into movies. A piece of trivia is that Peter Sellers' last film was an adaptation of one of the Fu Manchu stories. And so on the left side, you can see what is the result of when you just do a Google search, Wikipedia, and it comes up Sax Rohmer and says born and died, and he wrote 42 novels and so forth. And resplendent in pictures, on the left he's in a beautiful dressing gown. When you open the Wikipedia article on the man, on the right side you'll see another picture of him in a dressing gown, and the same information. What puzzled me when I first encountered this entry was, where was the man? No, he was born in England, but why does he die in White Plains, New York? It puzzled me. What was he doing there? I thought he died in England from cursory research a long time ago, so I got started checking. The first thing I did was check contemporary newspapers. On the left, you'll see the New York Times, and it states he died here, Byline, London, in University College Hospital. So I checked the London Times, and it says he died in London Hospital on Monday. So, in fact, the further I got in, I discovered that Mr. Rohmer simply owned property, a house in White Plains, New York, and whoever was writing the Wikipedia entry on the man adapted, the biographical data, but made a mistake when they put it in. A long time ago, the entry was written, and in fact, Rohmer has been tagged with an incorrect resting place. He died in London. But because nobody cares enough to update the entry, in fact, that piece of misinformation, alternative fact, has been offered to anybody who is researching Sax Rohmer for a long time. So that's one entry or one issue with Wikipedia, that if you don't care enough to enter correct data, in fact, you will be purveying misinformation for a long time. The second issue I'd like to get to involves a very minor writer named Edwin Baird, but he was the first editor of Weird Tales. It's the pioneering pulp magazine that specialized in horror fiction. Wikipedia does have that part correctly. And I was researching Edwin Baird and got a little curious and made some interesting discoveries. And one of the discoveries is that the date of 1957, which is traditionally given to him as a death date, was in fact not correct. I found newspaper entry from a different year, and well, that was a concern because Wikipedia was quite in error. So I made a change. I corrected the death date, and Wikipedia did not want that. You can see highlighted, unexplained change of year. Why? Because what I was publishing was original research. Wikipedia does not want original research. The various entries on Edwin Baird state he died in 1957. Original research stating otherwise is not desirable. When I protested, in fact, I was kind of kicked off Wikipedia and sent a very cranky letter banning me from editing that article for 6 months. So Wikipedia continues to purvey incorrect data because it will not permit original research that corrects that incorrect data. The third thing is one of these more delightful pieces. It involves the series character Amelia Bedelia. And a few years ago, actually, it was in 2014, E.J. Dickinson on The Spot wrote a very amusing article called How I Accidentally Started a Wikipedia Hoax about Amelia Bedelia. And her opening paragraph explains that she made up a piece, a paragraph, when she and her boyfriend were drunk and stoned back in 2009. And as she said, had just come from the McDonald's drive-thru to get chicken selects when we decided to edit Wikipedia pages for various semi-obscure children's book authors. And what they did is they put in a statement that said Amelia Bedelia was a maid in Cameroon, and that the author had, Peggy Parish, had based the character on a maid in Cameroon. And this piece of silliness or fraudulence took life. And on the right side, you'll see some of the things that Ms. Dickinson has noted. It's been cited in a lesson planned by Taiwanese English professors, cited in a book on Jews and Jesus, cited in innumerable blogs and book reports, as well as a piece by another blogger who speculated was in that Bedelia's tendency towards malapropisms was inspired by Parish in Cameroon. One blogger even speculated that Amelia Bedelia wasn't a maid but a slave. It's been cited on TV websites, Find a Grave pages, and so forth, even picked up by the new author of the Amelia Bedelia series, Mr. Herman Parish, who believed that his aunt based it on a lead character in a French colonial maid in Cameroon. In fact, it was completely made up, as Dixon spends her time explaining, and that leads to the next issue with Amelia Bedelia. If it sounds good, it stays. Yeah, that's Wikipedia. If it sounds good, it stays. People think it sounds nice. It's like what Stephen Colbert calls factish, factoid, truthish, truthy. Amelia Bedelia was a maid in Cameroon. Therefore, that sounds great. There's a fair amount of, what would you call it, colonialism here, imperialism, but it's not my point to dump on Wikipedia. But at the same time, I do want to alert that all three errors exist resplendently, promiscuously, ubiquitously in Wikipedia. Entries are not updated. Original research is not included, cannot, will not, as a matter of policy, be included, and hoaxes abound. This is just one hoax. There are plenty of others in Wikipedia. So, offer a progression. I want to now move into my second example, that reputable sources of misinformation exist too. Several years ago, I encountered a story of a flying man, a wonderful thing. It appeared in the Haunted New York City. I'd encountered it a few years earlier in an encyclopedia of parapsychology and the paranormal, and got curious, wrote an article on it that nobody thought was worth publishing. So I entered this one already having an idea what to do. But when I saw this in Haunted New York City, I was delighted because I knew what would be the case. So, as it says in the little piece on Haunted New York City, one witness of many said the creature was a man engaged in flying toward New Jersey, and provides an exact citation, September 12, 1880, New York Times article. The first thing any researcher and any librarian does is verify the citation, which I did. Here on the right side of the screen is it's the first paragraph from that New York Times article, and it's a delight to read, and we won't spend too much time reading it, but you'll see it appear in the first sentence, near Coney Island, 1,000 feet in the air, and think about that, a man with bats, wings, and frog legs and something, and that's absolutely a delight. So I was curious, as any researcher would be, could I verify this through other sources? So the first thing I went to was places that provide accumulations of historic newspapers. And in fact, there was nothing on flying men in Coney Island in those 309 papers from Redex. There was nothing in flying men and Coney Island in a very reputable and vetted database. And so what I was left with, and what I went back and concluded after reading the article is a deliberate hoax. It's a spoof, and in fact, the flying man is based on a current religious figure that would have been instantly recognizable to any New Yorker of the day, and the New York Times was just having fun about this person. But where does all of this go? Misinformation and so forth. Some conclusions then. And the first one I want to make is that there's nothing wrong with public and free resources, but they enshrine errors, they can be co-opted for mischief, they make corrections difficult if not impossible, and they conceal rather than recognize their biases. I didn't get into discussing biases of atrocity and descriptions of human rights abuses, but anything that claims to be neutral on the reportage of these is up for, I don't know, it's debatable whether it's viable as a source. So moving along, there's very rarely long-term institutional investment in improving or developing the resource. So a public and free resource is great, but if it doesn't have a long-term institution, the institution can be academic or it can be corporate, there's potential issues of things becoming dated, new information coming along, original research supplanting older research. And as a result, there's unlikely to be long-term institutional investment in acquiring and maintaining the resource. Why would you, as a person and institution, want something that is dated and can't be relied upon? There's thus, though, something that happens, that libraries as communities don't adopt things, and they don't share things, or vice versa, they do adopt and they do share. And when they do adopt and share, they create what would you call it, a community awareness. And so if something isn't adopted, it doesn't matter if it's any good or not, there's not going to be widespread community awareness of it. It's going to be, at best, an in-house or an on-desk resource. There's thus no commonality or systemization of research approach, which is to say, there's no library involved, because that's what libraries do. We provide a commonality of resources. We provide systemization of research approaches. And I say that's what libraries do, but really that is what librarians do. So libraries invest and sustain. We criticize and improve. We systematize and share. We provide collective resources, of course. I mean, I don't think I'm telling anybody things that you've not been aware of for a long time. We create communities, but the point I would really want to make again and again, libraries are simply institutions. It's the librarians who do this. And even today, at a time when information is considered fungible and facts are considered alterable, we still do this. So where am I going with this? What do librarians do? We are a community that's based on shared resources and shared knowledge. We recognize that misinformation and false information exist, and sometimes for generations. It can be a false death date. It can be something as silly as a book on Horatio Alger. The first lengthy biography of the man was by a man named, I believe, Walter Meyer. And he was so bored with Horatio Alger that he simply wrote what he wanted to write, and almost 40 years later admitted that he made it up as he went along, that sort of thing. Or Amelia Bedelia. We recognize, though, that information literacy helps people. And we won't get into lengthy discussions of what is information literacy. There are many places out there that do that, and I'll be citing some in just a moment. But also I want to recognize, too, that we recognize that strong relations with vendors help create stronger resources. If you have an issue with a resource, if you have a question about a resource, simply query your vendor, talk with your vendor. Good relations mean that you're working together, and you might have a good adversarial relationship, but it's a good relationship nevertheless. Vendors are not your enemies. And we recognize that providing access to vetted information helps people. And again, I'm not going to spend a lengthy time talking about what is vetted information. I think we all know this. Okay, so information literacy is the antidote, I'm sorry, it's not the anecdote, antidote to fake news. So what can you do to work with information literacy? And the first thing I would recommend at any institution is explain to the administration, the library administration, the professors, the university, the college, the school administration, that information literacy is vital and it's relevant, and that librarians have a contained and sustained role. If possible, get on curriculum development committees. Use examples, such as I have provided, to show why simply because it's out there and free does not mean that libraries and librarians are not needed anymore. Because, as I said, free resources often are very costly. You have 3 examples to show why free resources can't be relied upon necessarily. Okay. Work with instructors to ensure that assignments used the library resources meaningfully and appropriately. In all probability, if you're like most of us, you're overwhelmed by students and work and faculty and everything. Don't try to teach the classes all yourself. It's not doable necessarily. Instead, move to the next level up. Teach the teachers. Explain to them that you wouldn't presume to teach them how to teach their subject, but similarly, you know the library better than they know the library, and that you'd like to share your knowledge so that they can share with the students just to make sure the most current information is available for them. Try to meet with the instructors once a semester, once a quarter, even once a year if you're not changing rapidly. But don't assume that the instructor, no matter how bright she or he is up to date on the library, because that's not their job. That's your job. You are the librarian. You are the expert. Similarly, don't assume that student technological facility equals informational assessment capacity. We all know students. They're the young people walking around with their mobile devices at any given time. But they are not necessarily capable of assessing what they find there or more of knowing where the vetted, the strained, the correct, viable information is. The students are very flexible, and if they see something out there that fills their needs, they'll take it. But if you can show them why there's another source out there that's better for filling their needs, they will move to that. They're not necessarily restricted or restrained. You just have to show them why it's appeal to their best interests, why what you wish to show them is a superior resource. It might involve a different screen. It might not be as mobile accessible as some things, but it's better for answering the question. Again, you can show why Wikipedia or free resources aren't necessarily the best places to start. They're great ready reference, except they're not. As I said, people turn to them as ready reference, but in fact, even on basic data such as birth and death dates, they're wrong. Okay, don't believe you're alone in this problem. You are not. In fact, you are far from alone, and there exist many organizations and outfits out there that are willing and able and have websites that are very elaborate, designed to help you with information literacy. So I'd like to recommend Project Information Literacy. If you are a member of SpringShare Library Guides, it's a shared guides for doing research. It's absolutely terrific. You don't have to be an expert on Victorian literature or African sociological literature from Cameroon or whatever. Somebody somewhere probably is and has done a guide, and you can use it through SpringShare. The ALA Instruction Roundtable. Every year they have meetings, but they have a very active mailing list, and the Library Instruction Roundtable is a wonderful place to discuss issues, present concerns, get policy statements, and so forth. And another thing often overlooked, your vendor, the people who are selling you or leasing you your electronic resources. They are one of the finest places to get beautifully professionally designed guides, to get handouts, and also to get advice. If there's an issue with a resource or a question on how you use the resource, they are the people who are vending it. They should, and they are, very happy to answer questions. Again, it may be an adversarial relationship with them, but it does not have to be a negative one. And it should be a very positive adversarial relationship because both of you are making each other stronger. So the next thing, which is sounds silly, but don't give up. It's an ongoing basis. It's recurrent, it's lifelong, and I've noticed that as I've gotten older, they've all stayed the same age, but don't give up because it's fun. You're training the next generation of informed users, and there's nothing more rewarding than that. And so I'd like to pause then and say thank you for joining us. If there are questions, I hope now is the time to ask them. And a reminder of what Ms. Quinn said, a recording of today's webinar will be sent to all registrants in just a few days. So thank you. Over to you, Meg.
To see. And I have a question here from somebody that is for you, Richard.
Okay.
It says, would you recommend editing Wikipedia, finding citations or fact-checking, as an information literacy exercise for undergraduate students in an instruction session?
I have heard of it being done. One of my former colleagues here, in fact, used to have it done involving pirates. They had a seminar on pirates in a history class, undergraduate, and he did it with his students, and they had a great deal of fun. So yes, I would. I think it's a terrific thing. But keep in mind, of course, that your edits may in fact be edited by somebody else. And indeed, if you're providing the famous original research, Wikipedia may come down and say, rather snootily, this is not, it does not agree with a published information and send you a cranky letter. But yes, I think it's a terrific exercise, and especially because it takes you to original resources that you can show, in fact, where this information was derived from and how it was changed. As I said, I don't know if you know the names Dr. Steve Park and his students were working on pirates and historical pirate entries, and everybody was having a grand time doing this. It's a terrific exercise.
Okay, thanks. And there's another question here. So how do we best buck the powerful tide of popularity towards Wikipedia? Basically, how do we combat that?
Well, I don't think you should look on it, again, as a combating situation. Wikipedia exists. It's not your enemy, paradoxically. If it's sort of what you can say a crowdsourced resource. And the crowd simply is just not up to what it should be. And I think that the only way we really can deal with it is by working with it, as the first questioner said, editing it, and not hesitating to point out when we find errors in it, and but pointing out too that Wikipedia's suffix is .com. There are many other .coms out there, some of which do much better in answering the questions. They're much superior resources. And when you present it as a .com battle or .com concern, today's generation of consumers understand it. It's a rival .com. Wikipedia is out there first as a .com, but EBSCO.com is out there also, as are other .coms.
Okay, and lastly, do you have an example that was used maybe at UConn for an information literacy class?
Oh, goodness,
or
yes.
Part of a class?
Yes, there are many of them. They're all on LibGuides, by the way. SpringShare LibGuides. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We have a whole series of what we call examples, class guides. We had it's an undergraduate, the first year experience, freshman instruction, variety of names. We have for instruction in upper level subjects. There's no shortage of them, absolutely.
Okay.
I can send you links if you contact me.
Okay, I'll include your a link to your email in the follow-up that everybody will receive who registered. There's another question. Is there a way to check whether a URL is fake, such as someone takes the Washington Post page and posts some incendiary article, but it turns out to be fake? And are there organizations that check URL?
There are organizations. yes, there indeed are there are actually quite a few of them. The classic one, and it might be that it's more reactive than proactive, but the classic one is Snopes, that they take information and they verify it. Snopes.com, I think it is. But there are many others that do this. And Snopes is impartial, and if something is correct, they'll say it's correct. If something is partially correct or based on a misattribution, they will say so. They have no mercy to anybody. At the same time, they're supportive of everybody by that standard.
Mm-hmm.
They're simply out there to verify, and it can be something as trivial as a misstatement about the Eskimo having hundreds of words for snow, or something as significant as a political event. Let's leave it at that.
Okay.
Political statements.
Another question is, what do you think of the trend to have a Wikipedia librarian on staff? I wasn't aware that was a trend.
I wasn't aware that was a trend. I would really be very interested in hearing more about that, because I'd very much like to see a job description, and would delight in reading it, actually. I'm very curious. So I would like very much to learn about that one. Thank you for telling me. I'll be looking now.
Okay. I think that's it.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Richard, for a great presentation. And it was just a half hour, which is a nice short chunk of time that everybody can finish their schedule.
It was my pleasure.
Oh, great. So thank you, everybody, for joining.